topic for today, we are going to talk about foot and toe mobility and health and strength and all that fun stuff, because one, I did get a request to do this, and two, literally right before I just started recording this, I posted a entire toe activation mobility series that I'm going to go over in this video, and also kind of talk about the importance of having adequate control over feet. So if you look at the design of our hands and feet, they're very, very identical. Very, very, very similar. Even bone structure, I believe, I can have this mixed up, and I think I said this on my show before, that one of them has 26 bones and the other one has 27. So they're very, very identical. So when it comes to these two joints in particular, they showcase a lot of similar traits, but the only difference is that we have our feet constantly covered by our socks and shoes almost all day. And if you're the typical person, when they come home, they don't typically go barefoot. They're in like slippers and socks or whatever else thing that you wear at home. And it's a shame because we are, Dr. Andrew Spina would always say this, basically putting little casts on our feet, and you expect your feet to react the way that they're designed when you do something active, especially something like running that requires all those small little intricate muscles in the foot to function the way that they're designed. So imagine you taking your hands and putting like mittens on them and then trying to go on your iPhone and try to like swipe left, right, and text. You wouldn't really get that far, and you don't have that tactile touch, right? So our hands exposed to our daily environment gets a lot of good feedback, and it can adapt to that feedback. Our feet don't really get that. And this whole topic of foot health and foot strengthening really will come down from the work of Dr. Emily Spickle. She is literally the person that I've learned so much from. This whole idea of surgery, when it comes from like a biomechanical standpoint, again, this is my opinion and the opinions that I've heard from other fitness professionals that are more so on the rehab side, I can't speak today, that have seen patients post-op when it comes to these things, and they all kind of said the same thing, is like, a surgeon kind of looks at a problem like, okay, my door is not closing. I'm going to shave off the door and now it closes. Whereas like a exercise physiologist, a physiotherapist, chiropractor that works with patients post-op or pre-op, whatever it is, they don't look at like, oh, the door's not closing, and they want to shave it off. I'm going to look at the hinges. Maybe there's something wrong there, and let's fix that problem instead, right? And a lot of times, surgery on these kind of things will lead to some improvement from like a pain standpoint of like, say your pain out of 10 is a 7 and you get surgery and now you're down to a 5, but it's still there, right? It doesn't really take away the problem. And then say 10 years down the road, you're kind of back to square one and things are kind of worse, and maybe something else is bugging you now. And the foot is kind of one of those things. So, say you've been walking in a certain gait for your entire life, and now you have to get some sort of surgery on your foot because X, Y, and Z. Let's just not get into the different things out there you get surgery for. And then, pain goes away, your foot's awesome, but now you're getting like medial knee pain for some reason, and then your hip and low back hurts for some reason, all because of what happened down below in your foot or your toe, whatever it is. And that's what Dr. Emily Spickle, I'm just going to call her Dr. Emily from now on because I don't want to keep butchering her name if I'm doing it wrong. That's what she quickly realizes, that she was actually making her patients worse with these traditional surgeries for the foot. And then she kind of ventured in like, okay, what are corrective exercises or a way to like rebuild the foot from the ground up? And she's now quite the educator in that realm, so I highly recommend you check her out. When you think about it, when you walk, there is a series of events that has to happen at the foot in order for you to propel yourself forward. So if you think of a heel strike going first, a little bit of supination, meaning you're going to go to the outer portion of your foot, and then you're going to pronate down towards the big toe, and then you're going to push off the big toe to propel yourself forward. So it's almost like a heel out, in, down to push yourself forward, sorry. And a lot of times when people don't have strong enough feet, they'll do weird things, like they'll like overly pronate or overly supinate, or you know, they're flat-footed, whatever it is. The big thing that people need to do is start training barefoot and start rebuilding their arch, rebuilding the small intrinsic muscles. And a guy way before his time, Vladimir Yonda, who was a physiotherapist, probably coined and created, I believe, this is how as far back as I could find, an exercise called short foot that would help rebuild the arch. And it's such a small little movement to rebuild. And like Vladimir was way beyond his time. He understood the body quite well, and now you see a lot of physios and chiros utilizing his methods and principles and things like that when it comes to understanding the body. So it's super cool when you kind of go down that rabbit hole. But anyway, short foot. If you look at my foot, the idea is to get this arch activated. So the big toe that's on the ground, you want to think of literally shoving it into this big joint. So you want to think of pulling like this, but this joint right here that's popping off the ground, like I can put my finger under it, should stick to the ground as hard as possible. So I'm literally just pulling in and down, pulling in and down. So when you see my next pull, you already see that arch activating. And relax, pull, relax. It's a small little movement, and a lot of people have trouble trying to figure out how to do that without like curling their foot in like this. And what's funny about this little exercise, this little short foot that I'm doing over and over again, it's a small little thing, but if you put your fingers like on your arch underneath here and you start doing that, you can feel the small little intrinsic muscles contract. And the funny thing is, like, if you are a kettlebell person and you start doing swings, or if you watch someone doing swings barefoot and you watch their arch, every time they drive the kettlebell back and as they get to the top of their swing and they snap their hips, you see their arch literally fire up to root themselves into the ground. And I would classify a kettlebell swing as a way to build up your arch. And there's a reason why people in the kettlebell world utilize barefoot training, right? So it builds strong feet, and people miss that mark a lot, and we just need more stimulation of that foot. A lot of times when people try to, you know, go down the barefoot craze, they kind of do too much too soon and then end up with more problems. But if you look at kind of the progression, if someone were to start training barefoot, like the easiest thing is like in your warm-up, go barefoot, right? Don't just go the entire hour now barefoot training, because you're gonna fatigue those muscles, you're gonna make them worse, right? It's kind of similar to like, oh, I want to start running. You're not gonna go run a full marathon this weekend. You're going to like build up to it. Same thing with barefoot training, right? Like you can overly strain, you can do more damage than do more harm than good, right? So short foot is kind of the first progression I get people doing when trying to rebuild their arch. It's that small little pull. That is a great starting point, but then the other aspect to it, like depending on what you're dealing with, is just doing some soft tissue work. Because sometimes what I find with people's feet is they're very stiff, and we haven't even really got up to the chain of like the ankle itself, but the bottom of your foot, and I'm literally showing my foot to the camera, like there's a lot of fascia and soft tissue in there before it gets into the bone. Like it's thick, it's really thick, and in order for that stuff to loosen up, one, you have to add some like movement for it to kind of reinforce to the nervous system that that particular said tissue needs to move, right? It's the SAID principle, right? It adapts to specific stress. So if I'm stressing my feet to move outside of their normal of being in a sock and shoe all day, then the little muscle cells that are in there that are responsible for movement are going to adapt to that stress. So that being said, literally getting a lacrosse ball, tennis ball, golf ball at the bottom of the foot just to start moving that tissue will help. If you went through like a standpoint of like rehab, like depending on how bad your feet are, you can get rock taped, you can get kinesio taped, same thing. Cupping can be done, you can do some instrument assisted, and you can literally get some like soft tissue work from a manual therapist to kind of move the process a little faster. But if you're not going down that route, then you have your short foot, you have your soft tissue. And now if you look at my foot that's super white, in my Kinstretch class I do this every single time. And actually another thing to note, if you look at my foot, there is a huge gap between my big toe and my rest of my toes, and that is a good inclination of balance. So if you look at chimpanzees, for example, or just monkeys in general, their feet are literally like my hand. So where my thumb is and where my fingers are, there's a huge separation, and that allows them to spread out more, to have more of a base of support. So then it can literally wrap around a branch, and now they have really, really good balance and stability, right? A lot of times people's feet, the big toe is kind of like smushed in like this against their other toe. And then you'll see already like this big knuckle here, a lot of people will get that bunion formed because they're wearing shoes that literally goes into this like triangle position and just scrunches up the feet together like this. And over time, like again, our body adapts to the stress you put on it. So if I'm wearing a shoe like this that's crushing my fingers together, and think about what I was just saying about how a step happens. You go on your heel, you're supposed to go down, out to the side, into the into pronation, and then the big toe pushes off for propulsion, right? So if I have this all crumbed together like this, the only really way to do it, like it's really awkward to do it with my hands though, heel out and then pronate. So if I'm pronating with this kind of position of my toe in the shoe, like this is going to take up a lot of stress, and your body's going to build more calcium around that to protect that joint, and then boom, you formed a bunion, and eventually that's going to get super painful. But if you train your feet and you wear proper footwear, you're going to end up with space in between to give you more balance. If you look at gymnasts, they have the same foot setup, or someone like in Cirque du Soleil, they have really good balance because they have good separation between the toe. But for the most part, everyone's big toe is kind of crushed like this, and then bunion forms. And that's really hard to do the exercises I'm about to show you if you're used to this like 8 to 12 hours a day, right? So in my Kinstretch class, the simplest thing that I get people to do is like, okay, we're gonna lift our big toe up while the rest stay on the ground and back down. And it's literally just this one big toe going down and up, down and up, down and up. And you'd be surprised how many people can't do this, lifting just their big toe while the rest stay down and back down, right? So right away, when I see people not able to do this, I already know that their gait must be messed up because they can't actively control that big toe. And like if you think about it from the side view, that big toe, like look at how much activation I'm getting into my arch. Like that's a lot. And if that big toe can't move freely, then this arch is not going to be working the way it should. And now another variation from that is that the big toe stays up while the rest come up and back down, up, back down, up, back down. A lot of people have trouble moving the rest of their digits independently from that big toe. A lot of times when I see this, they bring up all their toes, but I physically want people to keep that big toe down and keep the rest of the toes going down and up, right? From there, my next progression is all the toes come up towards the ceiling, and just the big toe goes down and then back up. Just the big toe goes down, back up. And then the next progression is all the toes again up towards the ceiling, but the rest of the digits, so like the pinky toe to that toe right beside the big toe, go down to the ground and back up, down to the ground, back up. Now, our feet should be pretty dexterous, and like the next progression that I work on quite a bit is having all the toes up and aiming for one toe to go to the ground at a time. Kind of like if I was on a piano with my toes, I'm trying to go pinky, next toe, the next toe, the next toe, and the big toe go last. Ankle mobility. So the ankle itself, you need adequate dorsiflexion, meaning I should be able to drive my knee as far forward as possible without my heel popping up in order for me to like squat, lunge, and things like that, walk, run, sprint adequately. But a lot of times if people have toe mobility issues, activation, the bottom of the foot is super tight, and all the fascia that comes in the back here and in the front that wraps around, it's also going to be tight. So a lot of times when I check people's feet, their ankle mobility is also super tight. So when I check dorsiflexion, it gets kind of stuck here. And most of those people will have some sort of deficiency when it comes to running, walking, whatever. So now I know that if I can fix the foot, it'll influence the ankle. If I influence the ankle, it's going to influence the foot. It's kind of like a yin and yang type of situation here. So sometimes all it is just working on ankle mobility exercises, ankle cars, pails and rails in this situation, rolling the crap out of like the soleus and gastroc of the back, because sometimes the calf is super tight. I think for the most part a lot of people's calves are super tight and they need a lot of work. So sometimes it's just a soft tissue thing and more of like a neuromuscular control thing. I'm gonna leave it at that. That's a lot of information. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Start doing your toe intrinsics. That's what they're called, toe intrinsic exercises. It's gonna help a lot and it might come in handy, you know? Next time you drop a pencil, pen, whatever, you pick it up with your feet. It'll be like that episode in The Office when Dwight was trying to practice 10 minutes a day with his feet to do everyday items and then spilt all the coffee on him. But let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out. Hit the show notes. Thank you guys. Show notes again. Add me on Facebook and Instagram. I post a lot of video and photo stuff. I love you guys. Until next time.